My name is Rachel Morgan, I'm 32 years old, and my story begins on a Sunday morning that was supposed to heal old wounds. My mother, Linda, had invited the family to brunch for the first time in months, promising a fresh start. I almost believed her until she leaned across the table, smirked, and said, "You're lucky we even include you, pity goes a long way." That single sentence didn't just ruin brunch. It shattered years of silence I had convinced myself was peace. White right pointing backhand index before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. It was a crisp March morning, one of those rare days in Ohio when the air feels like spring is trying to push winter out. I pulled into Miller's Diner, a small place off Route 28 that smelled like burnt coffee and maple syrup. My hands were gripping the steering wheel tighter than they should have been. I hadn't seen my mother since Christmas, when she left halfway through dinner after joking about my divorce. I told myself this brunch would be different. Maybe she really wanted to make peace. Maybe she finally realized how her words had been cutting me down for years. When I walked in, I spotted her immediately, hair done perfectly, scarf knotted like she was running for office. My brother Evan and sister Julie were already seated beside her. I noticed there wasn't a fourth chair. The waitress had to bring one over. That was the first sting of the morning. "Rachel, you made it," Mom said, her tone cheerful but clipped, like she was announcing a late guest to a church luncheon. "We were just about to order." "Of course," I said, sliding into the chair. "Wouldn't miss it." She smiled thinly. "Well, that's new." The waitress came over. We ordered pancakes, bacon, eggs, the usual. I tried to focus on the sound of sizzling from the kitchen, the clatter of dishes, the chatter from the next booth. But under the table, my foot was tapping. Mom was already steering the conversation toward Julie's new promotion at the insurance company, then Evan's new car. Every few minutes she'd shoot me a glance, as if checking whether I was still sitting there, still invisible. I tried to join in. "That's great, Julie. You've worked really hard for that." Julie smiled politely. "Thanks, Rach." But Mom didn't miss a beat. "Well, some people just have that drive." Always knew Julie would make something of herself. She didn't even look at me when she said it. I forced a smile. "Yeah, she deserves it." The food arrived, and for a few minutes, I thought maybe I'd imagined the tension. Then Mom reached for her coffee, took a slow sip, and dropped the sentence that would burn itself into my memory. "You're lucky we even include you," she said, smirking just slightly. "Pity goes a long way in this family." The air seemed to vanish. Forks paused mid-air. Evan cleared his throat. Julie froze. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to laugh, to say she was kidding. But she didn't. She just kept stirring her coffee. I heard my own voice before I even realized I was speaking. "Excuse me?" "Oh, Rachel, don't be so sensitive," she said, waving her hand like she was swatting a fly. "You know how things are. You've drifted. But we're trying to include you." I stared at her. "Include me? I'm your daughter, not some charity project." Evan whispered, "Mom, maybe." She cut him off with a look. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. It's not like you've made things easy, Rachel." I wanted to shout, but something in me went quiet instead. Completely quiet. The kind of silence that isn't peace, it's the sound right before something breaks. I looked down at my plate. My eggs had gone cold. The syrup on my pancakes had congealed into a sticky mess. I felt like I was watching myself from outside my own body, like I was just another diner patron witnessing a stranger's humiliation. Julie tried to change the subject. "So, Evan, how's work going?" He muttered something about long hours, avoiding my eyes. Mom went back to sipping her coffee like nothing had happened. That was her power, she could wound you, then act like she hadn't noticed the blood. When the waitress came to refill our drinks, I smiled at her, just to prove I still could. She smiled back, the kind of smile that says, "Honey, I see you, and I'm sorry." That small human moment grounded me. I stood up. "I think I'm done." Mom looked up, surprised. "You haven't even eaten." I lost my appetite. Her lips tightened. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I said quietly. "I'm just done pretending this is normal." For a split second, I saw something in her eyes, something like fear, but it was gone as fast as it came. "Suit yourself," she said. "You always do." I left a 20 on the table and walked out. The cold air hit me like freedom and pain all at once. My car was parked under a bare oak tree, dusted with old snow. I sat inside for a long time before starting the engine. In the reflection of the rearview mirror, I saw my own face. Calm. Too calm. My hands were shaking, though. For 32 years, I'd been the one who called first. The one who apologized, even when I hadn't done anything wrong. The one who showed up to every holiday dinner, hoping maybe this time would be different. But that one sentence, "You're lucky we even include you," burned away all the excuses I'd been telling myself. I started the car, but instead of heading home, I drove aimlessly. Past the old elementary school, the park where Dad used to take us, the street where Mom used to wave from the porch like everything in our house was picture perfect. By the time I got back to my apartment, the sky had turned pale gray. I sat on the couch, wrapped in my old blanket, and tried to understand how a woman could say something so cruel to her own child and not even flinch. And that's when it hit me, it wasn't about this brunch. It never had been. This was about control. About years of small jabs disguised as concern, guilt wrapped in love, and a family that revolved around keeping Mom happy. Something inside me changed that day. Not like a light switch flipping, more like a door unlocking. I didn't know it yet, but that brunch wasn't just the breaking point. It was the beginning of me taking my life back, piece by piece. I poured myself a cup of coffee, took a deep breath, and made a silent promise. No more pity. No more begging for a seat at her table. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my own terms. When I woke up the next morning, my apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The coffee maker hummed softly, filling the air with that rich scent that usually comforts me, but not today. My chest felt heavy, like something invisible was pressing down on me. I stood by the window, watching the cars pass below, thinking about how normal everything looked, people heading to work, kids laughing at the bus stop, while my own world felt like it had cracked in two. On the kitchen counter sat my phone. I half expected a text from Mom, maybe even a guilt-laced apology wrapped in passive-aggressive words like, "Sorry if you felt offended." But there was nothing. Just silence. I sat down at the small table, where a stack of unopened mail stared back at me. I began sorting through it, mostly bills and flyers. Then, tucked between them, I found a postcard. It was from Mom, dated 2 years ago. A family vacation I hadn't been invited to. The front showed a smiling photo of her, Evan, and Julie on a beach in Florida, wearing matching t-shirts that said "Family Forever." The message on the back read, "Wish you could have joined, but I know how you get around crowds. Hope you're doing okay." That last line burned. I never said I hated crowds. She said that and repeated it so often that everyone believed it. That was her way of rewriting who I was, one small story at a time. I held the postcard for a long time before tossing it into the drawer. It didn't deserve space on my fridge. By noon, I decided to take a walk. It was cold but bright, the kind of day that makes you pull your coat tighter and walk faster just to stay warm. I stopped at Benson's Coffee, a small place I'd gone to for years. Karen, my best friend since college, worked there part-time on weekends. She spotted me as soon as I walked in. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, pouring a cup before I even asked. "More like I had brunch with one," I muttered. She raised an eyebrow. "Your mom? Who else?" I sighed, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "She said I should be grateful they even include me. Can you believe that?" Karen frowned. "That woman could make a saint swear." I smiled weakly. I don't get it. I've spent my whole life trying to earn her approval. Nothing's ever enough. Not my job, not my choices, not me. Karen leaned against the counter. "Rachel, you're trying to build bridges with someone who keeps setting them on fire. You can't win with people like that." Her words stuck with me, but hearing them didn't make it easier. I still wanted answers, not for her sake, but for mine. That night, I went digging through a box of old keepsakes I hadn't opened in years. There were photo albums, birthday cards, and letters. I noticed how uneven everything felt, like I was only half a member of the family. In every family photo, I was either cropped out or standing slightly apart. One photo caught my eye. It was my 10th birthday party, paper hats, melted ice cream, a cake that said happy birthday, Ratch. Everyone was smiling except Mom. She was looking away, distracted, her hand resting on Julie's shoulder instead of mine. I remembered that day vividly. She had forgotten to buy candles, so I blew out invisible ones while everyone laughed. I told myself it didn't matter. But looking at that photo now, I saw something I hadn't before: my father's face. He was watching her, not me, with a kind of quiet sadness that only makes sense when you're older. I placed the picture on the table and whispered, "You saw it too, didn't you, Dad?" The apartment felt smaller that night, like the walls were closing in. I decided to write in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. March 13th. I think I've been chasing love that doesn't exist. Maybe she's incapable of giving it. Maybe it's not about me at all. Writing the words felt like lifting a stone off my chest. The next day, I drove out to the small cemetery where my dad was buried. The sky was grey, wind snapping through the bare trees. I knelt by his headstone, brushed away a few dried leaves, and whispered, "You'd know what to say, wouldn't you? You'd tell me to stop letting her win." I didn't stay long. Just enough to feel grounded again. When I got home, I found a voicemail from Evan. "Hey, Rachel," he said hesitantly. "Mom told us about brunch. She said you were dramatic. I know that's not the full story, but maybe just let it go. You know how she gets." That line, "you know how she gets," had been our family motto for years. I deleted the message. Later, as I sat on the couch, the rain started tapping against the window. The sound pulled me back to a memory I'd buried deep, a night when I was 15. I had forgotten my report card on the counter, and Mom found it before I got home. Straight as, except for one B in math. She waited until after dinner, then smiled that same sharp smile and said, "I guess not everyone can be gifted." I remembered Dad's face again, how he started to speak but stopped, like he already knew it was useless. That was the night I decided to stop showing my report cards altogether. Now, as an adult, I realized how many small cuts I'd collected from her over the years. None of them seemed big enough to scar me at the time, but together, they shaped me into someone who apologized for existing. I stared at my phone again, still no message from her. I didn't expect one anymore. But something inside me shifted that evening. Instead of waiting for her voice, I put on soft music, made myself dinner, and let the silence be mine this time. Before bed, I wrote one more line in my journal. She doesn't get to decide my worth anymore. For the first time, I believed it. I sat by the window for a while, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere, people were laughing over dinner, hugging their kids goodnight, living ordinary, peaceful lives. And for the first time in years, I didn't envy them. I just wanted my own kind of peace, one without sharp smiles or guilt-drenched brunches. As I turned off the light, I realized something that made my heart steady. Silence isn't always loneliness. Sometimes, it's healing finally taking root. And in that quiet apartment, with rain softly tapping against the glass, I promised myself I wouldn't go back. The next morning, I woke to sunlight cutting across the living room floor like gold ribbons. The rain had stopped, but the world still looked washed out, fragile somehow. I sat up slowly, the quiet around me heavy but not uncomfortable. For the first time in a long while, I felt still. But peace never lasted long in my family. I made coffee, opened the window a crack, and scrolled through my phone. A new message blinked from an unfamiliar number. "Hey Rachel, it's Claire from accounting. I didn't know your mom volunteered with us at St. Mary's shelter. She talks about you all the time, sounds like she's really proud." I froze. My mom? Proud? The woman who once told me art school was a phase that doesn't pay bills? Something didn't fit. Out of curiosity, or maybe suspicion, I called Claire. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "What exactly did my mom say?" Claire laughed softly. "Oh, you know that you're a marketing director in Chicago, doing great things. She said you're married now and expecting your first baby." I thought, wow, small world. My hand went cold around the mug. Married? Baby? Yeah, I said quietly. Small world. When the call ended, I just sat there, staring out the window. My mother had rewritten my life again. But this time, it wasn't just within the family. She was lying to strangers, crafting a version of me that fit her definition of acceptable. I shouldn't have been surprised. Still, something about hearing it from someone else cut deeper than I expected. That evening, I went through old photo boxes again, this time searching for something specific, proof of how long she'd been rewriting reality. I found a newspaper clipping from 10 years ago, a church newsletter featuring her in a group photo with the headline Community Spotlight, The Andersons' Legacy of Giving. Below her smiling face, it read, Margaret Anderson, local volunteer, proud mother of 2 accomplished children, Julie, a nurse, and Evan, a financial advisor. No mention of me. I sat back and laughed quietly, not out of amusement, but disbelief. She had erased me so cleanly that even the town newspaper had followed her script. The next day, I decided to visit my childhood home. It had been years, but something in me needed to stand in that space again to face the ghosts head-on. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked smaller than I remembered, though perfectly kept. Mom's car was parked outside, freshly washed. Her roses lined the walkway in strict, symmetrical order, just like always. She opened the door before I could knock. Rachel, she said, her tone measured but wary. This is a surprise. I won't stay long, I replied. I just wanted to drop something off. Her eyes flicked to the envelope in my hand, the postcard from Florida, the one I couldn't throw away. What's that? Just something you forgot to mention. I handed it to her. She looked confused for a moment before recognition crossed her face. Oh, that old thing. You know how mail piles up. 2 years' worth. I said softly. She stiffened, tucking the postcard behind her. I don't see why you're bringing up the past. You've always been sensitive. That word, sensitive, again. It was her favorite weapon. I glanced around the house. The walls were lined with family photos, but every one of them was the same pattern, Mom, Evan, and Julie smiling at some event. My face appeared once, high school graduation, but even there, she had cropped the picture so tightly that Dad's hand, resting protectively on my shoulder, was missing. Nice photos, I said. You've done a good job keeping the family image intact. She crossed her arms. Don't start, Rachel. I have nothing to apologize for. Maybe not, I said. But you have a lot to explain. Her mouth tightened. You've always misunderstood me. Everything I've done was for this family. For appearances. People talk, you know. It's easier when things look perfect. Perfect. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You erased me to keep things perfect. She turned away, adjusting a vase that didn't need adjusting. You chose your path. You left. I left because you never saw me, I said quietly. The air between us thickened. For a moment, I thought she might actually say something real, but instead, she picked up her phone and began scrolling. Dismissal, her favorite escape. I realized then there was no apology coming. No revelation that would make this better. So I walked toward the door, ready to leave the house for good until something caught my eye. A photo frame half hidden behind the bookshelf. I pulled it out. It was an old picture of Dad holding me as a toddler. We were laughing, faces pressed together, pure joy frozen in time. Behind the photo was an envelope labeled Rachel, do not open. I turned. Mom's eyes widened. That's private. Then why is my name on it? I asked. She stepped forward, reaching for it, but I moved first. My hands shook as I opened the flap. Inside was a letter, written in Dad's handwriting. My dearest Rachel. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you everything. Your mother loves you in her own complicated way, but don't let her silence make you small. You have more strength than you realize. Never doubt that I saw you, every version of you. Tears blurred the ink. My mother stood frozen, face pale. I didn't know he left this, she whispered. Of course you did, I said quietly. You just didn't want me to. For once, she had no words. Just silence. I folded the letter carefully, slipping it into my coat pocket. You can keep your version of the family, Mom. I think I finally found mine. Outside, the wind felt different, cleaner somehow. I stood on the porch for a long moment, looking out at the neighborhood. The same white fences, the same quiet lawns. It all looked so perfect on the surface. But now I knew better. Every house had its secrets. Every family had things they pretended not to see. Driving home, I passed the old grocery store, the park, the school, each place holding echoes of moments I hadn't thought about in years. The times I'd kept quiet. The lies I'd believed just to keep peace. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun was setting. The golden light poured across the walls, soft and forgiving. I sat down, unfolded Dad's letter again, and read it slowly, letting every word settle inside me like an anchor. It wasn't closure exactly, but it was truth. And maybe that was enough for now. The next morning, I woke up with the letter still on my nightstand, edges crumpled from how tightly I'd held it in my sleep. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, painting warm stripes across the walls. For once, I didn't feel numb, I felt alive, though in a quiet, trembling way. Dad's words wouldn't leave my mind. Never doubt that I saw you. It played over and over like a melody I couldn't stop humming. I didn't know what to do with the ache that followed. It wasn't just grief, it was clarity. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a group message. Julie, Mom wants everyone to come over for dinner Sunday. She says it's important. I stared at the text for a long moment, thumb hovering over the screen. Important in my family could mean anything: a celebration, a guilt trip, or another performance for the neighborhood gossip chain. Still, I typed back. I'll be there. 2 days later, I stood in front of the familiar front door again, this time, with something heavier than nerves. The smell of rosemary chicken drifted through the air. My mother had always used food as armor. She believed good cooking could disguise any kind of tension. Inside, the dining room looked as polished as ever: crystal glasses, folded napkins, candles flickering in even rhythm. My siblings were already seated. Julie's smile was too bright, her lipstick perfect. Evan's eyes flicked up briefly before settling back on his phone. Rachel. Mom greeted me, her tone sweetened but brittle around the edges. You made it. I set my purse down and smiled faintly. Wouldn't miss it. The clinking of cutlery filled the first few minutes, polite conversation layered over quiet unease. No one mentioned the postcard. No one mentioned the letter. But I could feel it sitting between us, invisible yet heavy, like smoke after a fire. So, Julie said brightly, dabbing her napkin. How's work? Still at that small firm? I nodded. Still there. That's great, Mom cut in quickly. You've always liked keeping things simple. Her voice carried that familiar edge, the one that turned praise into a paper cut. I smiled thinly. I guess simple suits me. Evan shifted, uncomfortable. Let's not start, he muttered. I glanced at him. Start what? Nothing, he said quickly. But his jaw tightened, he knew something. Actually, Mom said, clearing her throat, since we're all here, I wanted to talk about something. I may have overstepped. Julie looked at her curiously. Overstepped how? Mom's gaze flicked toward me, then back to her plate. I shouldn't have said certain things to people at church. Or, created impressions that weren't quite accurate. That's one way to put it, I said quietly. Evan looked up. What impressions? That Rachel was married and Mom started, but I interrupted. And pregnant. Apparently, I'm living quite the life in Chicago. Julie's fork froze mid-air. Wait, what? Mom exhaled, her composure slipping just slightly. I just didn't want people asking questions about why you're, still figuring things out. You have your own path, and people don't always understand that. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. You didn't do it for me, Mom. You did it for you. Because my real life didn't fit the picture you wanted to paint. The table went silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause. Evan cleared his throat. Maybe she didn't mean any harm. Didn't mean harm? I turned to him. She erased me from her version of our family. That's not harmless. Mom's lips trembled slightly, the first crack in her perfect mask. Rachel, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I felt my heartbeat pounding in my ears. 4 years, I'd stayed quiet to keep dinners civil, holidays smooth, and family photos picture perfect. But that silence had cost me too much. It's already hard, I said softly. You just never wanted to see it. Julie shifted uncomfortably. Mom, why didn't you ever tell us about Dad's letter? Mom froze. What letter? The one I found behind the photo shelf, I said, pulling it from my purse. He wrote it for me. You hid it. Her face drained of color. I didn't hide it. Stop. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. You've spent your whole life controlling the story. But you don't get to control this one. Evan set his fork down, the sound sharp against the plate. What did it say? I hesitated, then read softly. He told me he saw me. That I had strength I didn't know about. That Mom loved us in her own complicated way. The room went still. Mom's eyes glistened, not with remorse exactly, but something close to fear. I didn't want you to see that letter, she said finally. Because I knew you'd use it against me. You've always looked for reasons to make me the villain. I didn't need to look, I said quietly. Julie reached across the table, touching my hand. Rachel, maybe she thought she was protecting you. People grieve differently. I looked at her, my older sister, the peacemaker. Always smoothing things over, always standing between us like a referee who never picked sides. Protecting me from what? The truth. Mom stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Enough. I have done everything for this family. You don't understand what it's like to hold it all together, the judgment, the whispers, the expectations. Her voice cracked. For the first time, I saw not the polished matriarch, but a tired woman who'd spent her life pretending perfection could save her. Evan spoke softly. Mom, no one's judging you. We just want honesty. She turned toward him, eyes desperate. You think honesty fixes things? It ruins them. I looked at her, really looked, and something inside me shifted. I realized she wasn't just cruel, she was afraid. Afraid of being ordinary, of being seen as flawed. Maybe that fear had built this whole web of lies. Still, fear didn't excuse the damage. I stood up slowly. You're right, Mom. The truth ruins things. But maybe they're things that needed to break. She stared at me, speechless. I placed the letter on the table, right in front of her plate. You can keep pretending if you want. But I'm done playing along. Then I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard Julie's quiet sob, the sound of Evan's chair scraping as he stood to follow, and Mom's faint whisper, something between a prayer and a regret. Outside, the night air was cold, crisp, honest. I drew in a deep breath, letting it sting my lungs before exhaling everything I'd carried for years, the shame, the guilt, the constant effort to be enough. For the first time, I didn't feel like the outcast. I felt like the truth itself, painful, imperfect, but real. I walked to my car under the soft hum of streetlights, feeling the weight of the night settle around me. The family might never be the same after tonight, but maybe that was okay. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't just come to the table. It flips it over and leaves you with the pieces you actually want to keep. The drive home that night felt different. The air outside my window was sharp, cool, and alive with the soft hum of crickets. Streetlights glowed in patches of gold, like tiny reminders that even in darkness, there are fragments of light if you're willing to look. My hands gripped the steering wheel loosely. For once, I wasn't trembling from anger or fear. I was steady. Empty, maybe, but in a good way, the kind of emptiness that makes space for something new. When I reached my apartment, I left the lights off. The quiet wrapped around me like a blanket. For so long, silence in that place had felt like loneliness, but tonight, it felt earned. It was mine. I sat on the couch, kicked off my shoes, and let my head fall back. The letter from my dad rested on the coffee table. I didn't open it this time, I didn't need to. I already knew the words by heart. Outside, someone's radio played faintly from another apartment, an old Fleetwood Mac song about moving on. It made me smile a little. There was something poetic about that. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming across my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of someone else's expectations sitting on my chest. I made coffee, fed the stray cat that had started showing up at my window last week, and watched her curl up on the fire escape. I decided to name her June. She looked like freedom, small, scrappy, and entirely her own. Later that day, I called my sister, Julie. She didn't answer the first time, but when she finally did, her voice was soft. Hey, I said, leaning against the counter. Rough night. You could say that. She sighed. Mom's been quiet all morning. She didn't even make coffee. That's a first. I hesitated. How are you? I don't know, she admitted. Angry. Sad. Relieved, maybe. You said what we've all been thinking for years. I just never had the guts to. Her honesty surprised me. For the first time, it felt like we were talking as equals, not just sisters orbiting around Mom's moods. I didn't mean to blow things up, I said. Maybe they needed to blow up, she replied quietly. Sometimes you have to let something fall apart before you can see what's worth saving. I smiled faintly. You sound like Dad. Yeah, she said. Maybe that's not a bad thing. We talked a little longer about work, about Evan, about how strange it felt to have the truth out in the open. Before hanging up, she said something that stayed with me. Ratch. I think you're the only one who's really free now. That sentence followed me all afternoon. I took a long walk through the park near my apartment, the one I used to avoid because families always gathered there on weekends, and I'd feel like an outsider watching someone else's happiness. But today, it felt different. Kids ran through piles of fallen leaves, couples strolled hand in hand, an old man fed breadcrumbs to ducks. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. I sat on a bench, letting the autumn breeze tangle my hair. 4 years, I'd been waiting for some grand closure, an apology, a moment that fixed everything. But maybe closure wasn't about fixing things. Maybe it was just about accepting that some people can't love you the way you need, and learning to love yourself anyway. A little boy ran past me, chasing a red balloon. His laughter echoed through the park, sharp and bright. It hit me then, I didn't need to rewrite my past. I just needed to stop living inside it. That evening, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to my manager. I'd been offered a position in another city months ago, but I turned it down because of the guilt, the feeling that moving away would make me a bad daughter. Not anymore. Hi, Laura. I've been thinking about our conversation from earlier this year. If the offer's still open, I'd love to talk about relocating to Portland. I'm ready for a new start. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. The next few days felt like slow healing. I boxed up old photos, donated clothes I no longer recognized myself in, and filled my space with small, comforting things: a thrift lamp, a few plants, a second-hand record player that crackled just right. On Sunday morning, I drove out to the lake, the same one my dad used to take me to when I was little. The water shimmered under the pale sunlight, rippling softly. I sat at the edge, toes brushing the surface, and whispered a quiet thank you to the man who had seen me when no one else did. Then I took out a small envelope. Inside was a copy of the letter. I didn't want to destroy the original, but I needed to let go of the pain tied to it. I watched the paper drift onto the water, folding gently as it floated away. The wind picked up, carrying the edges farther from shore until it disappeared into the distance. That was when I realized freedom wasn't loud. It wasn't a dramatic declaration or a perfect ending. It was quiet. Simple. Ordinary, even. It was making your own coffee without guilt. It was walking through a park without wondering if someone was watching. It was the sound of your own laughter echoing back and not shrinking from it. That night, I cooked myself dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread, and ate by the window while the city lights flickered below. June purred softly beside me, her tail flicking against my arm. I laughed, low and real, as she stole a piece of bread from my plate. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything. Not to my mother. Not to anyone. I opened a fresh notebook and started to write, not about pain or betrayal, but about beginnings. About the quiet moments that make up a life after chaos. Halfway down the first page, I wrote, "Sometimes the loudest freedom comes after the quietest goodbye." I set the pen down, exhaled, and looked around my little apartment, the flickering candles, the messy desk, the cat curled on the rug. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what my mother would ever call success. But it was mine. And in that simple, peaceful truth I found everything I'd been searching for.